Nice to see everybody.
Okay. Pastor Jane, I just made two announcements about the study group on Acts and about our interfaith service coming up. And note for both of those will go out to both of our congregations in our electronic communications.
Great.
So,
Do you want to say anything about a serious man, or do you have any information like when you're available to do that, or?
no more than yesterday when we met. So
Okay.
I think we'll have to
Send out
wait
a
until.
note once we've got a suggested time and date for us to have
Great.
our
Okay.
closing night party.
And you won't get a complete grade unless you've come to that
That
move
is
forward.
right. You get an
Right.
I.
An I or a U, even worse, unsatisfactory.
You remember U's? E's were always the best. E for excellent.
Yeah. Okay. All right then. Before we get to John, and as I already apologize to those that came first, that this would be absolutely reckless to make any statements about the gospel according to John certainly from my point of view. The best we could do is to look at certain passages and read them how they might be encourage people to be anti-Jewish or have over the last 2,000 years. And then after we do those passages, I've chosen a few paragraphs from the United Methodist Church's instructions on interfaith dialogue with the Jew or interfaith relations with the Jews. But before that, from last week, I want to begin with something that connects with today. Today is Holocaust Memorial Day, Yom HaShoah. Not this evening it starts, but it already started in Israel, and we sat with our family and we did a little listening to Sasha's family. Sasha's parents were hidden during the war, and Sasha's father, who was able to reclaim his property that was squatted in by people who Meshatfei Pula, the people that what's the word for people that cooperate with the enemy? With the Nazis, they were given that house, and he was able to get that house back, and that's where her brothers were born. That house, and that house today has what's known as a stumble stone in front of it, and Sasha went for the dedication of that, and lo and behold, the nearby town features in this video here, this rather strange video.
Can you tell us, Rabbi David, what a stumble stone is?
Yes, I will. In the meantime, make me a host again. You disabled.
Yeah, sorry, you bet.
A stumble stone is a little plaque, bronze plaque about this big, that you will find in many places around Europe, mostly Germany, where the Nazis occupied. Germany, Hungary, where have I seen Germany, Hungary, Holland, but I don't know about France. There must be places wherever the Jews, wherever Nazis did damage, and somebody wanted to dedicate that. There's one particular artist who conceived of this project in Germany, and there's thousands of them around Europe today. And the idea is that you stumble upon it and you see, no, something actually happened here that I need to remember. And so Sasha's father's home, that became a site unbeknownst to Sasha's family, and the woman who knew about the history of the house, who was the current owner, didn't think anybody from Sasha's family was alive. And then somebody said, no, his son is alive. His son's a famous criminal lawyer who, get in touch with him. And then, so Sasha and her two living brothers went to that dedication. I forgot how many years it was. It was very, very emotional for him. And so Sasha shared a little bit about those stories. She also has a diary, her father's diary from the war years, his teen years, and the war is, he was 18 when they were hiding. They were thrown together in one. Sasha's parents didn't know each other. They grew up differently. They were thrown together in one particular farm household, and then they stayed together after the war. And so in future years, we decided, because the girl said, how was it for them? What were they feeling? And Sasha said, my parents never spoke about it ever. And so after my father-in-law died, they found this diary, and Sasha's been translating it slowly into English from Dutch. And so that's what we decided next year. We're going to look and see how did Martin feel during those years?
And I think the word is collaborator.
A collaborator, that's the word I was using for. Thank you. Okay. And so, lo and behold, down the road, in a village down the road from where Sasha's father grew up and where Sasha's brothers were born, we have this very, very strange story.
Zingen wij hieraan, halleluja, het tweede lied, halleluja, 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 halleluja.
So I guess you could pick up the hallelujah, right, or alleluia. But what even Sasha was unable to hear are some of the lyrics that are found in this piece that appeared in the last few days. How do I get? Hold on just a second. In the Times of Israel. Let me go back. Sorry. These are the same guys with the overcoats, right? Right? So Dutch carolers vow to keep singing anti-Semitic Easter song. The song about the Jews entitled "Christ is Resurrected" is part of a tradition dating back to the 19th century. And in it are the words, in the song about the Jews whose lyrics are printed and distributed to passerbys, the singers denounce the Jews who with their false counsel sacrificed Jesus on the cross. Now, it goes into discussion here about where that came from, a little bit of background of Vatican II, whatever, which is to put it into perspective, this Kanan Lifshitz, who I otherwise have very little respect for. I have some personal experience with him as a reporter working on something I was involved in and found him to be less than professional, but I'm happy that he brought this story to the Jewish world. He's a freelance Jewish journalist. And so you've got this, and you've got this this carol, and you can imagine, and they're younger people, right? They're younger guys, they've got their tradition is the overcoats. It's a little bizarre. Anybody who wants to, who's Christian, can and a man and Christian can join into the line with them, and they're very proud of this custom. It's kind of like when you get people at this is our history. This is our tradition, and you got to wrinkle your eyes and say, this is our tradition, and who cares who it hurts, right? Who cares what damage is doing? It's our tradition. That's sacrosanct, right? That supersedes everything else. And so surprising. I guess the good part of the story is that it's bizarre. When you look at it, it doesn't happen very often. Doesn't happen.
Like the people are just kind of standing there on the sidelines. They're not cheering them on or anything. They just look kind of like in shell shock. Like, what are they? You know what I mean? Like, you don't see much support from the town as they go through.
Yeah, I think that first of all, it depends who shot that video and when it was shot. It looks like a rather dim, gray, drizzly day, and of course, it could be the people in Amsterdam say, well, the people in the east of Holland they act that way all the time anyway. Yeah. It's like the Dutch speaking of the Belts, the Belgian, the same with the Flemish. Okay. What I'm trying to say is this stuff is alive. It's not alive in our backyard, thank God. Maybe it's less out there, bizarre, grotesque as it is in this particular story. And the good news, I repeat, the good news is that this is an aberration. This is not a normal thing. It's presented as something bizarre and weird, and it's seen that way. So that should give us some comfort, I think. Okay? All right then. And we'll ask more. I'll be in Holland next week, and we'll talk to some people about it.
Don't wear one of those coats.
Yeah, I actually have an overcoat from Sweden that color, that length.
Careful.
Okay, but I'll be careful. Okay, all right then. So does everybody have the text? Who's on the call today? Okay, then let's do it this way. Our preferred methodology, and wrong sheets. I got too many books. I got two. Okay. So as I mentioned, I drowned a little bit overwhelmed a little bit by just trying to get a feeling for a better acquaintance with the gospel according to John, which I've kind of stayed away from until now, not on purpose, just I focused on Matthew more than anything else. And just a tidbit of information, because people have started to tell me a few years ago, Father Andrew Green said to me, well, it's John who are always talking about the Jews. And you say it that way also, the Jews, right? Those Jews again. There they are. And we're going to talk about us and them a little bit later today. Oh, you know what? We'll talk about us and them right now. My main impression from John, this is my impression from my preparation for this week and other things I've read, is that the author is promoting a feeling of us and them. And that in itself is not unique, us and them. The question is, who is the them? Are the them the Jews? Are the them the Judeans? Are the them particular Jews? You open up literature, modern scholarly literature on this chapter, on this idea, on this concept, or this theme in John about is John anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic, and you find all sorts of interpretations by all sorts of respected scholars. The one that seems that many scholars like is that this is Jesus the Galilean against the Judeans, and the same word would be used for Judeans or for Jews. I don't see that as much because I do see this in a larger context. And Pastor James, please tell me if I'm totally off on this, is that there is an us and them. We, unsere, right, us guys who are with Christ or with Jesus and showing his we get it. Those others, they just don't get it. The other don't. And although you have that theme in other parts of in the Synoptic Gospels, it seems to me to be just soaked in so much of John. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that's totally true. One of the most helpful resources I have, and there's one that's for the Synoptic Gospels and one for the John Gospels, and I forget the name of the two authors, but it's called the Social Science Commentary on the Synoptic Gospels and the Social Science Commentary on John. And the two, and it's really excellent, like what the mindset, the Semitic mindset, the cultural mindset of the time, so you better understand. And they really make a point that, especially in the Gospel of John, it's like a lot of like the insider wisdom versus the outsider. So it's all about like, if you're the inside, you get it, and if you're not, you don't. And that's why like all the characters in John, like all the outsider characters, even the disciples, like they're always kind of dunces. They don't get what Jesus is like. You have to be on the inside, and then you kind of laugh that they don't understand the all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a very astute commentary.
Good. Well, good. Thank you. And now for a little bit of statistics. I'm not big on biblical statistics. Like, I'm not the one who says, when we get to the beginning of the book of Judges, there'll be so many times that this is mentioned, that is mentioned. Interestingly enough, I did talk about linguistic statistics today in the book of Deuteronomy in our study earlier today, because sometimes it's important to mention. It's important to mention what's in a book and how much a book stands aside from another book or a passage because it has a particular word or a particular set of words more than others. That's important to know. It's also important to know when something doesn't appear. The famous example of that would be God not appearing in the book of Esther at all, okay? So in the Synoptic Gospels, the word Iudeos, that is the Jews, appears 15 times. That's all the three Gospels, Luke and Mark and Matthew together. You have the term the Jews only 15 times. It's not broken down into 555, but it doesn't matter. You get a feeling. But in John, 62 times. And in the 62 times, 25 of them have a meaning of the people at large with overtones of hostility, right? And 6 of them alone in the Passion narrative. Now, I purposely decided not to compare the Passion narrative because we did enough about the Passion, and we could do that another time, but we would find that in the Passion narrative, as opposed to what we did in Matthew, where Matthew, it seems to be the priests and the scribes and the Pharisees are the bad guys. Here it's the ganze Welt, the whole world, right? And I am purposely say in Yiddish the ganze Welt, or in English the whole world, because, back to my main point, I don't think that there was a fine distinction by the author of the Gospel according to John of the Jews, them, and the world. because it's us and them. And the them, look at, they're living in a Jewish country, in a country predominantly inhabited by Jews. Romans are there. There's soldiers that are around, but they're an outside force, and it's a Jewish culture. And so, it's kind of like in Yiddish, so those that grew up with Yiddish, that expression, the ganze Welt, the whole world. People will say, what do you say in the Welt? The Welt says, right? Sometimes says the world says. Well, they don't mean what's being said in Nicaragua and in Vietnam and in New Zealand, right? That's not the world. For that, the Welt is, what are people saying in our little shtetl, in our little village, in our area, our region of Eastern Europe? And I don't know what happened in Arabic-speaking countries where Jews lived, that they had a similar kind of a tendency. But that's kind of pushed me in this direction. That when sometimes you say, well, people are saying, and you always, well, excuse me, what people are saying? Well, today it's different because people are saying could be literally people all over the earth because we have access. But in pre-media, mass media times, people are saying, or unless you got the New York Times at LA. In the old days, and that was rare, then it's, what does the LA Times say? What does the Herald Examiner say, right? Or what does my Jewish community say? Or what does my church community say? What's the buzz in Palm Springs? All that has been kind of very, very mixed up today because of social media. Okay. But that is often the point that one will hear, is that John seems to have a problem with the Jews. Okay, and that's exemplified in the numbers themselves. So what I've done is I picked just a few passages that I thought would help us see this kind of attitude, this kind of a way of telling the story, of storytelling, that one could easily understand that those listening to the story would say, listen, we definitely have a problem with the Jews, and it's in our interest to keep that problem going, or to pursue that particular feeling. So why don't we begin with B, with John 5, 1 to 18. Alan, would you like to read the first paragraph for us?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. After this, there was a festival of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now in Jerusalem, by the sheep gate, there is a pool called in Hebrew Beth Zapha, which has 5 porticos. In these lay many invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. One man was there who had been ill for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and while I am making my way, someone else steps down ahead of me." Jesus said to him, "Stand up, take your mat, and walk." At once the man was made well, and he took up his mat and began to walk.
Okay, let's take apart this story a little bit, unpack the story. First of all, Alan, you got first dibs. Any particular comments you'd like to make?
Yes, the fact that the man is identified not by name, but by the fact that he's been there 38 years. And I suspect that at the time that this was written, that's another way of identifying an individual. Why would somebody be waiting 38 years or 40 years or even 10 years to receive something that is going to make them well? I mean, there's a, okay.
It aggrandizes the miracle that's going to happen, right? It makes it even more miraculous. So a few things. I'll first relate to what you said. It is interesting. No name, 38 years. In other words, he's the sick one. He's the other, the ultimate other, right? That people don't want to deal with, and it's as if they've been ignoring him. Now, you could understand from this translation that he was actually sitting in the porticos next to the bath for 38 years and nobody helped him. That would make everybody look a lot sinister, and that has been the way that this story has been interpreted in some ways, although I'm using a lot right now Raymond Brown on John, which is the Anchor Bible. It's an older commentary, but it's still it's the style that I grew up in biblical. It's very, very very pedantic even, I would say. And so he points out, doesn't mean he was necessarily sitting in that same place for 38 years, but your point is well taken. It's taken a long time. Some people like to say 38 years, what else was 38 years? And most people won't get it. It's a trick question. They'll say, because it's the 40 years in the desert. The 40 years in the desert weren't 38 years. They weren't 40 years. They're actually 38 years of wandering, because the first part of the first year was done at Sinai, and the last part was on the plain of Moab, which leaves only 38 years. To me, that's ungepar. That's uberchochem, right? That's a little bit too, but it's a lot of years. Because if he wanted to make it round, and the author wanted us to think of the children of Israel wandering, he would have said 40 years, I think, because that's how it was remembered in literature. So Jesus, says, "Get up." There's a parallel to this, a lovely story that I don't think I brought it when we were studying. There are many stories about Jesus healing, and stories about Jesus healing on Shabbat. The one that we did together was in Matthew, but there's a parallel in rabbinic literature in which, and it's two generations, and so goes in to visit the rabbi, and he's sick, and he says, "Well, are you happy? I mean, how's that going for you? Wouldn't you like to get up? Wouldn't you like to get better?" He sticks out his hand, and the other rabbi gets up, gets out of bed. And then the same story is repeated right afterwards with the next generation. When the Talmud does something like that, it's in order to teach a lesson with repetition. And the way that it's told there is not a story of miracle. It's a story of somebody else caring about it. It says, "Come on, let's get you better. Let's open up the windows. Let's get you some good food. Let's get you back into society." Now, is that a direct polemic with this story? Some would say yes. I don't think so. But I love the fact that there's something common. That influences how I see this story, where Jesus comes, sees a problem. Well, if nobody's paying attention to 38 years, let me give you a hand. Let me get you up. Right? To me, that's the important message here from a positive point of view. Where another hint that puts it into a positive point of view is very challenging because of where this is happening. But before that, let's go to the first verse. The Greek text says just a festival. It doesn't say the festival. If it said the festival, which it does in another passage, which we'll probably do today, that would be easier. The festival is so first of all, for those that are not familiar, there are 3 festivals, that is Shalosh Regalim, pilgrimage festivals in the biblical tradition. The first one just happened in our tradition in the first month of the year, which is Nisan, in the springtime, which is the month of Easter as well, which is the Passover, the beginning of the barley harvest. At the end of the grain, harvest, at the end of the wheat harvest, is a second pilgrimage holiday, which is you would call Pentecost, which we call Shavuot, the festival of the 7 weeks. And that's only a one-day festival. In the diaspora, some people keep 2 days, but essentially Passover is a 7-day festival, seven-day festival, and which is in the middle of the month. Shavuot, Pentecost, it doesn't have a date in the middle of the date in the month, because you count 7 weeks, 7 times 7. So on the 50th day you have the Shavuot, and then at the end of the fruit harvest, that is in ancient Israel, the figs, the dates, the pomegranates, the grapes, and the olives. Just those 4 fruits are the indigenous fruits, and those 2 grains, wheat and barley. By the time of the rabbis, by the time of Jesus, there were other fruits there, but from an earlier biblical point of view, there's those 7 things. And that harvest is done in the fall. Again, the full moon of the 7th month, and that is Sukkot /tabernacles /booths. I'm sure there's other huts, the festival of huts in Swedish, hut. It's the hut holiday. And so those 3 festivals, there was a requirement to go up to Jerusalem to bring sacrifice, to bring offerings. That doesn't mean everybody went up every year or 3 times, but it's a pilgrimage. Interestingly enough, our Muslim brothers and sisters, one of the 5 principles of Islam, as you probably know, one of them is fasting, Ramadan, the other one is the prayers, one is giving charity, but one is to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. And that is called, anybody?
The Hajj.
Hajj. So
yeah.
Hajj, in Arabic, Hajj is pilgrimage, and it means to walk around. A hajj, the root huj in Semitic languages is to circumvent.
Circumnavigate.
Circumnavigate, thank you. To walk around. So hence you've seen those amazing pictures of Mecca with throngs of people just marching around the Kaaba, the black stone in the middle. Same thing was done in Jerusalem. There was a marching around, and in Hebrew it's called Chag. Our word for festival / holiday, Chag, is the same as Hajj. To me, those are promising things. Those are things that remind us that we have a lot in common. And so what festival we don't know. You get all in the different commentaries have all sorts of options. Many people prefer Shavuot, Pentecost, because of the mention of Moses afterwards, and Pentecost at this time already was no longer an agricultural festival as much as it was a festival commemorating the giving of the law at Sinai. Others would say if it just says holiday, it means Sukkot. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that people were there. There was an audience. That's why this is so important. There's an audience of people for this to be done b'farhesia, in public. Get good publicity for it. And where is it done? It's called in a place that's called in Hebrew, says the Greek text, it's called in Hebrew Beit Zata. Now there's a problem with how Hebrew is transliterated into other languages, right? We have the same problem today, same challenge today. So in Greek as well. But you will know, anybody know another translation from another, from maybe you have another translation in front of you, remember from growing up or from reading this story? I mention it because it happens to be a famous name.
Bethesda.
Exactly, Bethesda. Now, I don't know if it's by chance that that big hospital is at Bethesda. I don't know if Bethesda came after the hospital was erected or they decided to do, but Bethesda is what is the older translation for and probably a more common translation for what the Greek is here. The manuscripts, the three families of manuscripts have it all in different ways. Beit Zaita, Beit Saida, and Beit Chizda. I like Bethesda would be in Aramaic Beit Chizda. Chizda as in chesed, as in loving kindness. When there's healing, grace would be a good translation. The house of grace. And so it's hard because the textual evidence is tricky. So it's hard to build an entire theory on that. But to me, it makes sense that the storyteller is saying, listen, Jesus showed up on a holiday, lots of people around, and in a very well-known place, known as a name of doing loving kindness, acts of loving kindness, where God does loving kindness to human beings, where human beings do loving kindness to each other. And this is the background. And Jesus was the only one who, I'm reading into it, but this is how I would hear the story, is the only fellow after all these years who lent a hand to this guy. And the guy says, well, even if I could get up, I can't get down to the water because everybody pushes aside, right? So we get that idea as well. The other sick people, the other people that need healing in that pool. The weird or the strange comment about why the water is what does it say here? When the water is stirred up. The best understanding of that I found was that there is and by the way, this place was found in the 19th century with the porticos and everything in next to the Church of St. Anne, which is now in the Muslim quarter. So we know exactly where this is a place that existed, and under that there's a water source. That's where they would it would be a reservoir of water, but under that is also a spring, which is it's not whatever you call a spring that bubbles from time to time. And when the water bubbled, that's the water that was considered to have the healing powers, which is common to all around the world, right? So all that is in the background, and this is like, how could you not love this scene? I'm speaking to you Jews, how could you not look at this? This is like the best of the best, right? And yet, what happens? John, you want to read the second paragraph for us? I need you to unmute first.
Now that day was a Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had been cured, "It is a Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your mat." But he answered them, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Take up your mat and walk.'" They asked him, "Who is this man who said to you, 'Take up and walk'?" Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had disappeared in the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Do not sin anymore, so that nothing worse happens to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Therefore, the Jews started persecuting Jesus because he was doing such things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, "My Father is still working, and I also am working." For this reason, the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because he was not only breaking the Sabbath, but was also calling God his own Father, thereby making himself equal to God.
Okay, so this fellow is two ways of understanding what happened here, right? They attack him. Now, people would say this is Shabbat Chol HaMoed. So it has to be either. Many people would say this proves it's either Passover or Sukkot, because those two holidays are 7/8 day holidays. Tabernacles is an 8 day holiday, and the Shabbat that falls in between that week, you have, it's the same atmosphere, but you don't and other people would say the Shabbat actually refers to the holiday itself, which in this terms is called sabbatical, because you're not allowed to do work on those days. One way or another, the predominant rabbinical view is that you don't heal on Shabbat, only life-threatening situations. And that's well attested to from the early rabbinic writings from the first few centuries of the Common Era. The feeling is if somebody, especially has been sick for 48 years, no, you couldn't come back, Jesus, and do it on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. You had to do it on Shabbat. That's kind of it. And then our reaction is, even my reaction is, really? Isn't that a little petty? He picked up his mat, right? By the way, they don't say so much that it's him doing the healing itself. In Matthew, in the story of the synagogue after the story of the wheat on Shabbat, you get the feeling that it's because it's the healing itself which was a problem. Here, they nitpick upon the fact of a mat, and the background to that is, everybody who doesn't know or traditional Jewish laws on Shabbat, not only are you not allowed to light a fire or all the 39 different things that you can't do that I think we looked at when we studied in Matthew, but you're not allowed to carry something from one place to another. That's why Orthodox Jews, unless there's a string around the neighborhood, which is a complicated thing, Orthodox Jews won't carry even a tissue in their pockets on Shabbat. And if they have a key, now we don't need keys anymore because you have mechanical codes for the door. They won't use electric codes, but a mechanical door thing. But they'll make your key into a belt buckle, that kind of a thing. So you're not carrying, you're wearing it. And so the carrying of the mat becomes a problem. And again, we say, he was sick for 48 years and you're worried about the mat, right? And so this is the casus belli, right? It's from this point on the Jews begin to persecute him. And in John, this is the first instance of explicit persecution this is where it starts. There's two other passages where it's kind of assumed maybe, but this is where it spells it out specifically. And then what is essentially the problem? I would say Jesus, from a Jewish point of view, makes it even worse for himself if he wanted to defend himself, because there's nothing wrong with this, because we, meaning me and God, we don't stop working on Shabbat. Yes, the first Shabbat, this first Saturday of the creation, God rested, but that was only because he had to show Adam that he had to rest. Adam and Eve, they had to rest. Otherwise, God, of course, continues to work all the time. Working meaning that nature does whatever nature does, if people understand that. So the idea of God resting on Shabbat became a little more complicated as theology got more complicated. And it's in that context that Jesus says, we don't rest on Shabbat, right? And that became, and the truth is that is a real issue. I don't think the issue was so much that he cured the guy because he picked up his mat, but more that now Jesus is saying he's part of the God. He's part and parcel of God in many ways. comments or different readings, different understandings.
This is nitpicking, but in my question, but if he had wrapped his mat around him like a cloak or something, I'm thinking of your belt buckle and a key to your door. Would this have not been work?
Right. I don't know what the mats look like and how they were done. I mean, if we think of more like a rug in front of your house, you know, that you wipe your feet on, I'm not sure. You know, I don't know. A yoga mat maybe, but the truth of the matter is, Orthodox Jews sometimes will wear their prayer shawl. They'll wear it to synagogue. That's why you'll see if you're near Chabad House in the eastern part of Palm Springs or the southern part of Palm Springs, you'll see Hasidim with their talitot walking to synagogue sometimes. Okay. Let's do the next section as well. I think, yeah.
I can read it.
Yeah, please go ahead. There's a typo here. It's chapter 7, 1 through 24.
Okay. After this, Jesus went about in Galilee. He did not wish to go about in Judea, because the Jews were looking for an opportunity to kill him. And the Jewish festival of booths was near. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea so that your disciples may see the works you are doing. For no one who wants to be widely known acts in secret. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed in him. Jesus said to them, "My time has not yet come, but your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify against it that its works are evil. Go to the festival yourselves. I am not going to this festival, for my time has not yet fully come." After saying this, he remained in Galilee.
Okay, and this is how some of the scholars like to say this is pitting the two parts of the land of Israel against each other: the Galileans who accepted Jesus and the message, and the Judeans of Jerusalem and Judah who did not.
And it sounds like even here his family doesn't believe in him. So it's not just Galileans; it's like even his family that lives in Galilee with him is.
Right, and so although we have to ask ourselves if we're being influenced by other passages.
Sure. I'm just saying, like, it's kind of reminds me a little bit of what we were doing in Matthew, like that it just couldn't get any worse for Jesus. Like, you know, nobody's on his side.
Okay.
Nobody gets it.
Now, the Festival of Booths is the one that's known as the most joyous of festivals. Just in the background, the reason for that is it's at the end of the agricultural year, so you're no longer having anxiety. What's in the bank is in the bank. You've done it all. Now you get to rest, and all the rest of you just wait for God to bring the rains for the next cycle to commence. But here you start to hear about the world, that business I said before about the world. And the world here is Jewish society, right? It's not Spain. It's not, it's not Mesopotamia. It really isn't in this case. Not. This is very, very land-centric, Palestinian-centric kind of message. Should we go on?
Well, you want to go ahead? Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron.
Oh, go ahead.
Just unmute, please.
Okay, you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I was a little bit confused reading this a third time about the brothers versus the disciples. Who were Jesus' brothers? I mean,
well, in the Gospel of John, his actual family has more of a pronounced place in the story. So there's different places where his neighbors say, "Isn't that Jesus, whose parents are Joseph and Mary, and whose brothers are this and that?" It's a different idea about who Jesus is, but I think it's actually literally his brothers that they're talking about, his familial brothers. Be my
right. So it's a common kind of misconception that Jesus was an only child.
Right.
Because in certain traditions it sounds like that's what it is, but then of course brothers from what mother? From another mother?
Well, and I think it's also what you also have in the Gospel of John, in addition to this battle or this rhetorical battle with the Jews, you also have a rhetorical battle with the Gnostic Christians, like the Gospel of Thomas. And that's why the disciple Thomas is always ending up looking like a bit of a stooge in the Gospel of John. And the Thomists were like, your body and your physical presence is of no use whatsoever. So you'll also see in the Gospel of John an emphasis on Jesus' physical body, and which is why at the end, when it's like Thomas is like, I won't believe you resurrected unless I can see the imprints of your hand. I mean, that would be so disgusting, to like actually show that. But in the Gospel of John, Jesus' fleshly nature's fleshly resurrection is really important and is a shock then to the Thomas person. So just an extra piece of information about how the gospel is working.
Thank you.
Do you want me to go ahead and read more of this?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. But after his brothers had gone to the festival, then he also went, not publicly, but as it were in secret. The Jews were looking for him at the festival, saying, "Where is he?" And there was considerable complaining about him among the crowds. Well, some were saying, "He is a good man." Others were saying, "No, he is deceiving the crowd." Yet no one would speak openly about him for fear of the Jews.
Right,
What's
so,
the middle of the? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
just the fear of the Jews. In other words,
I know. It's just like.
Right, but here's the thing: is that no Jews. In other words, it's not non-Jews wouldn't speak about it in the fear of the Jews. It's Jews for the fear of the Jews, which again leads me back to us and them.
Right. Yes, exactly.
The real Jews and the not real Jews.
For fear of the villains, you might just call them the villains. Yeah.
The village. Yeah. One thing I want this I forgot to mention in the previous section in chapter 5. Where they find the guy who cured you, right? Because everybody knows this guy doesn't walk. He's sitting by the porticos for 48 years, and he gives away Jesus, which is seems a little bit, you'd think that he would play along and not give him. It's not much of a reward to Jesus that he gives him away, but that of course is it gives it. We get the picture that all the Jewish leadership is doing over the holiday, instead of paying attention to what the holidays mean, all the offerings, the meanings, the prayers, whatever it is, they're just looking for Jesus, right? Instead of the holiday. And I think to me that's a meaningful thing as well. That's another way of casting a shadow. Go ahead.
About the middle of the festival, Jesus went up into the temple and began to teach. The Jews were astonished at it, saying, "How does this man have such learning when he has never been taught?" Then Jesus answered them, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. Anyone who resolves to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or whether I am speaking on my own. Those who speak on their own seek their own glory, but the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true, and there is nothing false in him." Okay.
So to me, this is kind of a pivotal section. When Jesus says, "My teachings is not mine," he's first of all saying, stop dealing with me. It's not about me, everybody. First of all, it's objective truth. I think that's a way of saying this is objective truth. Second of all, it's God, right? All your scheming whatever against me is a personal kind of thing. It's not about me. It's about God. I think that's an underlying message here. And the other thing is that this is a break. In other words, we know, and the readers of the Gospel of John, I think, knew whatever, that Jesus was a student of Torah, that he was knowledgeable. And when the people say he's not, he doesn't have any schooling at all, and he says, "You're right. I didn't get from the rabbis. I got it directly from the source." That's a real break. That's a real fissure with understanding Jesus as going a continuation of rabbinic society, or just a different view on it, a different take on it. In other words, no longer do you need that unending chain of oral transmission from rabbi to student, for hundreds and hundreds of years, the way the rabbis believed it was. I'm not saying that's how it was historically, but now Jesus is no longer a rabbi or a teacher. Jesus is not part of God, but if he's not part of God, he's certainly a prophet. He has prophetic status. And that's why the healing is so important as well, because because in the archetypes of healing prophets are Elijah, and Elisha. Elisha, I think you say Elisha, but Eliyahu and Elisha. And so, I think that this is a pivotal moment. And finally, this passage, the last passage here.
Did not Moses give you the law? Yet none of you keeps the law. Why are you looking for an opportunity to kill me? The crowd answered, you have a demon. Who is trying to kill you? Jesus answered him, I performed one work, and all of you are astonished. Moses gave you circumcision. It is, of course, not from Moses, but from the patriarchs. And you circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on the Sabbath in order that the law of Moses may not be broken, are you angry with me because I healed a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Do not judge by appearances, but judge with the right judgment.
Now, this is interesting because Jesus uses a typical and very common judicial method of argument here. Legal method of argument from the Talmud. It's in other places as well, but it's central to Talmudic logic. And that is what we call kal v'chomer, from the easy to the more difficult case. If you're allowing that you can do a circumcision on Shabbat, that's more than Shabbat, and that's just one small part of the body, it's literally the tip of one small part of only half the bodies of humanity, of the people, then all the more so you should permit saving the entire body or healing the entire body. The logic is impeccable, right? The logic is impeccable. And what he's doing here, what the author is doing, is he's putting it in the word exactly what the rabbis would have reasoned amongst themselves, and showing them to be, I don't want to use hypocrites on purpose here. I want to showing them to be inconsistent with their own thinking. Hypocrites wouldn't be the right term here, even though we talked about that when we talked about the Pharisees. They're just they don't even understand their own reason, their own logical methods, I think. Yeah. And of course the you, right? The us and them, you. I saw something interesting. I never realized it. One of the commentaries say, the people said to him, "You're demented," and I didn't really realize that demented comes from demon.
Oh, I didn't either.
Yeah. So that next time we say about somebody they're demented, we actually, it might be nicer to say they've been possessed.
Like Dr. Demento.
Yeah, Dr. Demento. My brother was on the Dr. Demento show once.
Really?
Yeah.
I know we're way getting off the path, but that's very cool.
In the old days of KPPCFM, the sound of stereo. Okay, sorry. I think that we
love
will.
your songs, Rabbi David.
Yeah, I think we'll skip the next. I don't know. We could. Yeah, I don't think we need the next passage. Let's take a look at E. Okay, and again, maybe I picked these because they have holidays in it. Maybe they stand out because that's the way the author would. Here's the holiday, and this is a strange occurrence of a non-biblical holiday, a post-biblical holiday. Of course, if you were in the Alexandrian Jewish community, you would say a biblical holiday because books of Maccabees are part of the canon. But still, the much later holiday of Chanukah, dedication being the holiday of Chanukah. Who would like to read? Steve, you want to read for us today?
At the time the festival of the dedication took place in Jerusalem, it was written, and Jesus was walking into the temple in the portico of Solomon. The Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long are you going to keep us suspended? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus answered, "I have told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe me because you do not belong to my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish. No one will snatch them out of my hand. What my Father has given me is greater than all else, and no one can snatch it out of my Father's hand. The Father and I are one.
So again, the us and them, right, around a holiday which again should have been bringing people together, but a holiday in the holiday context, as in beforehand, turns them into tribes, different tribes. Jane and I were talking with Rev Kev yesterday about tribalism, and this is essentially Jesus saying, you know, if you, either you're with me or you're against me, right? You're in my flock or you're not in my flock, and this is amongst the one people. It's the us and them par excellence. Anything else, Jane, before we go on?
Well, I just want to say generally, and this may or may not be true, and I'll just say it now. And I think I might have mentioned this to you before, Rabbi David, that when I was in Israel, one of my professors said that the book Gospel of John looks like it may have been composed or been, become it was used, circulated. It was the John community was up in Galilee after the destruction of the temple, which is where like a lot of this, the synagogue Judaism, the main of much more moved into Galilee after the destruction of the temple. And that that synagogue Judaism and Christianity were kind of vying for the same people to be in their community. And so it's very much kind of like a real infomercial about like how Christianity is just so much better than Judaism. And now whether or not that's true or not, but that was, and it wasn't that my professor had said that. He said he read a book somewhere, but I can't seem to find the book. But that's one of the reasons that it's so slanted against the Jews, because by that time too, there was the Sadducees were gone, and so there was just really just Jewish people by that time. They wouldn't be divided like they were with the Zealots and the.
So yeah, so to comment on
that's just something that he said. So that may be
right.
Another reason that there's like the inside group, they really get it, and then the people that have used brand X, that whose clothes are never going to get as white as the people who
the feeling that I have from this is that you're right, the Sadducees are out of the picture, as are many of the Zealots. This book of John, the Gospel according to John is dated between 80 and 120 or 125, something like that. And so that's a full 10 years after the destruction of the temple. And yes, the focus is on the Galil more. So I think the tension becomes there, rabbinic authority and non-rabbinic groups. In the rabbinic literature itself, it's constantly talking about the people of the land, Am Haaretz, in a derogatory sense. By the way, I think in every language around the world, that when you want to speak in a derogatory sense, you talk about country bumpkins, right? Yeah. Farmers.
I remember the pagans. That's what
when Sasha and I first got married, I was a farmer in the Gaza Strip, and so I wanted to learn how to say funny things in Dutch. And because we were Orthodox, it wasn't going to be the dirty stuff, as many people often do. So I learned to say, "Ik ben een boer," right? I am a farmer. Well, boer in Dutch sounds a lot like the word in English, which it means in Dutch as well. It means a farmer and a bum, and And so in Yiddish, for instance, Sid would tell us that if his parents or his grandparents used the term Am Haaretz, they meant a fool, a stupid, an idiot, right? An imbecile. But Am Haaretz literally means the people of the land. And so what historians have taught us from that period, this period of time, exactly when John is being written, from rabbinic literature, there's a struggle between the rabbinic leadership, and we don't know, we get the impression that they were the leaders, but we only have the rabbinic leadership, the rabbinic literature. We don't have the other literature. And the others, they were the landowners, right? I'm guessing they were good business people, and they were far from stupid people, but that's the way you demonize
them. Kind of again, like when I look at like the Andy Griffith Show, which I oftentimes use as a template for oftentimes the way the gospel kind of positions itself as, when the Andy Griffith Show, the people from Mayberry, they talk funny and they follow law differently, and it's, very loose. And and there's lots of dumb, kind of goofy people. And yet when the cops from Raleigh have to come in town to catch a criminal, it's always the goofy Galileans and their unique way of doing things that, show up the people from Jerusalem, So I sometimes think that's kind of the strategy too, that not necessarily in John, but in the synoptics more, I would say.
Right. Yeah, and in general in folk literature, of course.
And in general folk literature, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's read the next paragraph, please. Want to go ahead, Steve?
The Jews took up stones to stone him. Jesus replied, I have shown you many good work from the Father. For which of these you are going to stone me? Then the Jews answered, it is not good work that you are going to be stoned, that we're going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you thought only a human being are making yourself God. Jesus answered, it is not written in your law or in any law, I said you are God. If those to whom the word of God came were called gods, the scripture cannot annul, can you?
Can you say?
Can you say, there you go. Can you say the one who the Father has sacrificed and sent into the world is blasphemy? Blasphemy because I said I am God's son.
Okay, so this is the reoccurring theme about God, Jesus being God's son, and this kind of reminds me of my own life. I remember I was, if for anybody thinks that I'm a little bit drastic now in my opinions and the way I express my opinions, you should have seen me years ago in Israel, because the constant complaint was, David, we're not saying you're wrong. It's this how you're saying it, right? So it's not, what the end result, what you want, we believe maybe you're right about, but we don't like the way you're going about doing it, which to me was a way of deflecting the fact of the matter is they did anything they could to keep gays and lesbians out of rabbinical school, which happened to be the issue at the time. And so not in any way am I comparing myself to Jesus. That's not the point here at all. But this idea that one side would say, it's not what you're doing. It's how it's your theology. It's your intentionality. It's not your deeds. And of course, I think in later generations, this too makes everybody, or makes the Jews look poorly. Yeah. You saw that in the parentheses there over in your law. That's the way we would all like to read it, and there's a lot of and your kind of stuff. In other words, Jesus taking himself out of that equation. But there's manuscripts that read in the law, and so it's important to bring that as well. Not everything supports the argument that we want to make. Yeah. Does this remind anybody of anything at the Seder for the Jews or those that are familiar with the Seder? When Jesus says, if we accept the version, it says in your law. The four sons in the traditional Haggadah. The one is the smart son who asks all the good questions. The second is the wicked son who says, what do these things mean to you? What are they for you? And the father says, oh, for me and not for you? You're taking yourself out of our group, and therefore you're going to suffer for it. It cloppers them on the head. It's a difficult moment from a parental educational point of view. Comments or questions? Okay, so we're back to the world again. And this kind of fueled my comments before about the ganze Welt, the entire world. Wanda, would you like to read? For those that are following the text is in the chat box, if you didn't get a chance to see, and we're on the third page, letter F. John 15, verses 18 to 25.
If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me before it hated you. If you belong to the world would love you as its own. because you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. Therefore, the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you. Remember the word that I said to you. Servants are not greater than their masters. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But they will do all things to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sinned. But now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works that no one else did, they would not have sinned. But now they have seen and hated both me and my Father. It was to fulfill the word that is written in their law. They hated me without a cause.
So let's start with the last line. They hated me without a cause. That in Hebrew is sinat chinam, senseless or baseless hatred. And in the background, perhaps, is the rabbinic dictum that said, I think I shared with you, that the first temple in 586 BCE was destroyed because of idolatrous practice. But the second temple in 70 was destroyed because of sinat chinam, baseless hatred, or here, hatred without a cause. And I'm wondering if there's a connection there. At least conceptually, there's a connection. I don't know if from a literary history point of view there is, but it's drinking from the same well, literary well. But it's definitely this is the epitome of the us versus them, the world kind of a thing. And in essence, this is a scene which replaces the Hebrew biblical scenes of the Israelites being chosen by God to be God's chosen people. This is, in essence, a conversation that reflects supersessionism. Did I say that right? Supersessionalism? Help me, somebody.
No.
That's correct.
Is it supersessionism or supersessionalism?
I think now you're confusing me. I think the first way you said it sounded
Okay. And the idea of supersession, right? Which, by the way, lots of Christians don't know about. It's the Jews, worried about their stance towards Christians and Muslims. In Islam, it's actually not. It's not termed superstition. It's termed abrogation. The Quran comes to abrogate. Islam abrogates the other religions, the other two religions that came beforehand. Not that those religions are gone or were wrong, but they're not applicable anymore because Islam has come to its replacement. But I don't know why. I remember being explained in my introduction to Islam class what the difference between abrogation and replacement is. But that's the word. It's in Arabic. It's called nas.
It's a legal concept. Superseding laws in law, it happens all the time, where one law supersedes another one, whereas abrogate ends the prior law, and when you supersede, you simply replace. The whole thing is not abrogated or ended; it's just replaced.
Okay, all right. So in any case, though, that's something that Jews will talk about, knowing something about Christian theology, early Christian theology. But after Vatican II, that's not been that's I think, and in many mainline Protestant churches as well, that's not been a conversation. It will be in certain fundamentalist groups, I think, but it's not. I don't think. I'm guessing you've never included that in a sermon, have you, Jane? That Christianity comes to supersede Judaism.
Never. Nope.
Right, and that kind of
is. Don't hear the S word.
The S words, but that's kind of at the. This is what at least a Jew sees in this paragraph here. I think, and this makes it possible. And from my point of view, so anything else about this paragraph or anything else we've done before we segue into, because this is my segue, but I prematurely segued. So I didn't ask for comments. Any comments or questions about what we've done? Yes, go ahead, Wanda.
What was the word again? Because I've not heard that word before, as you said.
Supersession.
Okay, I thought there was a longer word. Okay, supersession.
Well, I said supersessionism. That is the belief in in the fact that Christianity superseded Judaism. I mean, it's in the background of saying the New Testament as opposed to the Hebrew Bible, right? The New Testament, the New Testament as opposed to the Old Testament. And why the politically correct term became the Hebrew Bible, so that you're not saying, well, you're the old guy, you're the has-beens, right? Okay. Anything else? And we're going to address that in just a second.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead, Jim.
I'm wondering who's Jesus addressing here? Because it seems to me that he's addressing those who agree with him.
Absolutely, he's addressing his people, his folk.
Whereas in the previous things that we read, which were earlier chapters, there's this us and them thing, and it's those Jews. Now he's addressing a different crowd.
But he's saying to this crowd, it's us against them.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, this is part of, I forget what it's called, but it's kind of Jesus's last big sermon where he talks about I'm the vine and you are the branches and abide in me.
The vineyard,
and then this is kind of part of that as well. So I forget what it's called, but it's all part of his sermon, his farewell sermon to his followers.
Okay.
Excellent. Great questions. Rabbi Ofer, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Thank you. I'm enjoying it much.
Okay. All right. You must be on vacation right now. I can't hold you to anything. Okay.
Well, look at his background. Kidding.
I'm guessing that's the library at Hebrew, the National Library in Jerusalem. Is that the right library? Ofer?
This is the second in command. Actually, it's the one in Hebrew College in Cincinnati.
Okay, the second in command. All right. So then, Pastor Jane, if I could ask you to read from the nest. I cherry-picked what I thought was pertinent to our conversations until now. And this is from the Book of Resolutions, the United Methodist Guiding Principles for Christian-Jewish Relations. Maybe just before I tell, and you have the link here, everybody can go to it yourself. You can get to it, or I'll put the link in the box here as soon as Jane starts to read, and then you'll be able to have it digitally, not copy this down. But tell us, please, Pastor Jane. So, what is this Book of Resolutions? What is the what's it standing in your church, or in a regular a regular neighborhood church, or how does it work? Is it binding? What does it cover?
We're getting into kind of the polity of the church, which I still only understand just a little bit. Don't tell anybody, because I'm supposed to be in charge of the church's polity. But we have a book of discipline. No, a book of discipline that's got not only a bunch of rules about church property and how we're supposed to be organized, but it also has a organization of principles. And anytime there is a lawsuit or some sort of action that's brought to the church that needs some sort of discernment, there's a board then that offers up a judgment. And I think those go into the Book of Resolutions. I think that's what they are. So I'm not sure the context of what led to this. I'm happy to do a little research while we're talking. What led to these, these resolutions? But my guess it's not probably unlike Vatican II, where the Methodist Church decided to do some work in terms of how we're going to our official statement of relating in an official and healthy, reformed way with our Jewish brothers and sisters, I'm guessing.
Right. And that's how I read it as well, as being a statement similar to Vatican II in spirit. The fact that this is
I'll look it up on my phone and see if I can find any more information.
The fact that this is the version from 2016, I don't think should lead us to believe that was the first time it was addressed. No. I'm sure it was addressed before, and this is just the latest. So would you like somebody else to read it then?
Yeah, that'd be good.
So Megan, would you read for us, please? We're at G, number 4, paragraph 4.
Paragraph 4. Christians and Jews are bound to God through biblical covenants that are eternally valid. As Christians, we stand firm in our belief that Jesus was sent by God as the Christ to redeem all people, and that in Christ the biblical covenant has been made radically new. While church tradition has taught that Christianity superseded Judaism as the new Israel, we do not believe that earlier covenantal relationships have been invalidated or that God has abandoned Jewish partners in covenant. We believe that just as God is steadfastly faithful to the biblical covenant in Jesus Christ, likewise, God is steadfastly faithful to the biblical covenant with the Jewish people, and no covenantal relationship is invalidated by the other.
Okay. So, in other words, this is what it was talking about before on Wanda superseding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is the recognized, and I think it's kind of it's a cool sign that many of the Christians who are with us today have never really thought of Christianity, the relationship between Christianity and Judaism. That means I feel that means you got a good education. So, it's in the background. So look at this is a realistic way of dealing with it. It's in the past. I would say. That's how anything that's unpleasant, and believe me, folks, as much as we found some things that are unpleasant in the New Testament here, and I try to find something positive in each of those things, for myself at least as a Jew, as a rabbi. But the Jewish tradition is equally filled with some pretty nasty stuff. Some of it is biblical, some of it's rabbinic, some of it is contemporary Jewish. So in no way have I meant to present it that look at you guys and we're fine, and we've done nothing wrong since those bad apple Jews got together with Pilate and that's not what I'm saying. But is presenting this was. But we see it differently. We have a different way of seeing it now. And then the emphasis that the leadership or the scholars that worked on this became the covenant. And there was now that's interesting. But to me, my critique would be, well, what if you have a non-covenantal religion? Like I think Buddhism, it would not be considered to be a covenantal religion, right? So does that, how does that apply? And that would be something and that may be addressed, by the way, in this thing. I was only focusing on the relationship with the Jews. So some interesting things to think about. But a serious effort to be made, on one hand, to be true to the tradition, yet also to be true to changes in contemporary Christianity. Okay. Megan, would you like to read the next paragraph?
Sure. As 5, yeah. 5, as Christians, we are clearly called to witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ in every age and place. At the same time, we believe that God has continued and continues today to work through Judaism and the Jewish people. We believe that God has not abandoned God's covenant with the Jews. We are indebted to our Jewish forebears, through whom the scriptures of the Old Testament have come to us, and through whom the one true God has been revealed to the world. Therefore, we reject any and all forms of evangelism that are coercive in their nature, violent in their means, or anti-Semitic in their intent.
Okay, and a common gripe of the Jewish people, especially Ashkenazim, has been this constant fear, especially people of Alan's age and other folks that are older than me. It happened to me once in my life. Once I was on a train to Connecticut and somebody signed my kippah and I was reading of something in Hebrew and tried to talk to me. That's not true. Once it happened then, and then years later at Taizé, those 2 Indian fellows, I think I told you this story about, the only 2 times in my life anybody even addressed me personally about this issue. But I do know that it's out there. I do know there's things like that. They're on the village, what do you call our village fair, the town fair, the street fair. There's a group of Messianic with a big booth every time. I stop by once to look at their stuff. She says, "Hi, my name is this. What's your name?" So I said, "Rabbi David." And so she says, "Oh, we have a rabbi too." I said, "Well, that's wonderful." She says, "Well, it's really horrible what's happening, in the world today." I said, "Well, yeah, there's a lot of problems. The fact that people just don't believe in the one, in the Torah and the one guy." I said, "Nah, I said, you don't really want to be challenging me on this stuff, do you? You know, really, let's leave it at
You don't
this.
know who you're talking to.
Let's not, but, and so, okay, it doesn't bother me, but it's that kind of activity. Mormons, who are very well known for their evangelicism, when they come to Israel, they have to sign papers. They have to, in order to get permission to come for a visa to Israel, they've got to sign a commitment that they will not proselytize in Israel. And maybe there's other countries like that as well. There could be Arab countries that demand that as well. Richard, what did you like to say?
I was just going to say, I hate to be the cynic here, but the only reason I think you can say that only a couple of times in your life is because 40 years of it you spent in Israel.
Well, 36 years, but the 4 years in Sweden, there's not a lot of process. That could be, but it's also zeitgeist, Richard. It happens to do with age as well. I think it's less done today than it was when.
That may be. I'm just saying. I can count. The multiple, especially when I was in the army. It was horrible when I was in the army, and that still goes on in the military. It's a big problem.
Good point.
The Air Force.
Good point. Good. Thank you for that. Okay. I accept that comment, definitely.
I can't seem to find, would need to do some more research. I can't find anything like that's talking about United Methodism and Jewish relations, like official statements or the journey towards that before 2016. But I know that there must have been. So I don't know what caused the 2006, what the purpose of that was, or I just don't know. That's an interesting question that I'd like to do a little more research on.
Okay, so would you read the last paragraph for us, Pastor James? 6?
Jim, did you have something you had to say?
Oh, sorry.
This statement by the United Methodist Church differs a bit from what many of us have either been taught or assumed. I'm thinking of the institution of the Lord's Supper, where Jesus says, this is a New Testament in my blood.
New covenant. Mm-hmm.
New covenant, I'm sorry, new covenant in my blood. Which implies that the old covenant no longer is valid. I think the Methodist Church here, Jane, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think that there still is a lot of, in the language of some of the traditional stuff, suggests, even the fact that it's the New Testament and Old Testament. There still is a lot of that kind of language you find in the Methodist Church. So I think in the culture of the church, I think you're right. It's still there.
Yeah.
To me, the first two paragraphs were kind of holding the thing from both ends. What's the expression? Not having your cake and eating it too, but similar to that. They're kind of burning it from both ends.
Yes, burn the candle from both.
Yeah, on one hand, we're the new Israel. We're this. On one hand, we do believe this is a new truth, whatever. But the other hand, we don't. We still want to respect those that came before us. It's kind of like, what's it going to be? It's either or. If you look at the traditional text, it is kind of an either or. But in this one, it's both and so I think it's very diplomatic in the way it's done. My guess would be,
I think an argument could probably be made that even if it's a new covenant, it's not necessarily saying that it's a better covenant. It's just a new covenant, So
paragraph 4 hits that very well.
Yeah.
Right. Think of it as those collectible cars.
Yeah.
McCormick's. Think of McCormick's, right? Is that right? Is it not everything new is good? You could pay a lot of money for an old Cadillac, right?
That's right. Look at Palm Springs, mid-century modern.
Right.
Go beyond 1970. Nobody.
Okay. Pastor Jane, the final word is yours in paragraph 6.
Christians and Jews hold a great deal of scripture, history, and culture in common. And yet we also share 2,000 painful years of anti-Semitism and the persecution of Jews by Christians. These two apparently discordant facts move Christians to seek common experiences with Jews, and especially to invite them into dialogue to explore the meaning of our kinship and our differences. Our intention is to learn about the faith of one another and to build bridges of understanding.
Had we seen this before, we would have totally stolen it, right? For the blurb for this study group.
And we would have gone, we're doing we're doing it better than anybody else. Because we have somebody whose brother was on Dr. Demento.
So see, Pastor
I,
Jane,
you know,
I would have just
verified
commandeered the
error.
language. I would have just cut and paste and used it in the
Right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think fortunately, you know, in our congregation and in many, just everywhere that I've ever been, you know, it's kind of a given that this is what not only we want to do, but it's super important. It's super important for us to do.
So, two final points from my point of view. One of them has to do with the language here of ongoing dialogue. And this is where my linguistic comprehension gets creative. In Hebrew, dialogue is du-siach. And siach is conversation. Du is like in duet. It's taken from Latin, right? Du-siach means two people talking with each other. When you want to talk about multiple people around the table speaking with each other, it's called a rav siach. Many. And so at some point, I remember talking with my father, and my father, of blessed memory, always loved to point out to me when I was speaking wrong English, when I was speaking poor English. Once I said to him about a particular organization that it's a mediocrity. He says, what's a mediocrity? I said, it's the governance of mediocre. He says, there's no such word. I said, well, it's a great word, though, mediocrity. Mediocrity is one thing. Mediocrity is the government of mediocreness. Okay. But the other time he pointed out to me is when I said that I'm interested in having a multi-log with other people. He says, what's a multi-log? And so, and this is before people talked about the multiverse, right? This is before Marvel Comics, okay? Or at least I was aware of it. And so I often, when I'm speaking about interfaith dialogue, I do talk about a multi-log. And the reason I use multi-log is dialogue still in my mind is kind of like, you know, us against them, or what it's the Methodists and Oram Midbar. We're not even a denomination here, but the truth of the matter is all the screens, all the boxes on the screen, each one of us is coming with a whole universe of associations, of histories, association of language or lack of language, whatever it is that we come to the party with, and all this is coming in. It's not just the people that are here; it's our parents and our teachers and our guilty conscience and our children. In that way, it's very much the multiverse, right, or the three-dimensional chess that Spock loves to play in Star Trek. There's a lot of stuff going on. And there's something inadequate with what we're doing here. What's inadequate is that from a world point of view, we should be in contact with Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists as well. And I'm talking about Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists who are maybe, of course, Americans, but I'm not talking about Western Buddhism, which is perhaps westernized more than Eastern Buddhism would be. But that's not the point. The point is that these conversations should be nourished from different directions, and we have some trouble here in the interfaith bodies to be are not very representative, and the leadership is not professional. Not in that they're unprofessional people, but they're not. They don't. Jane and I, this is what we do. We make time for this. And if somebody, for instance, we have a friend, a colleague, Father Richard, who would love to be involved in these kind of things, but he has a day job, right? He's a therapist. His work is volunteer work. Or an imam, which there was an imam who was more dedicated to that part of his work when I first came to Palm Springs. At this time, it's not. It's somebody who's a very busy professional who serves an imam in Coachella at the mosque, who's just not interested or available for this kind of conversation. And that's a bit of a pity. And we should try to figure out how we remedy that. We were on our way to remedying that. There was a planned event, what we called series we called Faith and Diversity, and we were given space for free by the cultural center. Palm Springs at the theater. For one Sunday a month for free, we could use it, and Jane and Kev and I and others, we were involved, and we had already scheduled something with Imam Jihad Turk from LA and then came the pandemic, so that canceled everything. So we need to try to go back to some of that stuff.
Let's try to do that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Yes.
In the Webster's dictionary is in the under a multi-log is going to be in its etymology will be a reference to you for having created the word.
And my brother who was on the Dr. Demento show.
That's
That will be a
right. You heard
footnote
both
on
of these
that
here first,
mention.
folks.
John, did you want to say something?
The congregation, the First Methodist Church I belonged to in Fresno, was a founding member of the Interfaith Council, and they went in 3-year cycles. The Christian and Jewish and Islamic leaders in the city had gotten together, and each year, in sequence, a scholar from one of the 3 faith traditions spent about 5 days in Fresno, spoke at as many worship facilities as they could in that short time. But there were classes that you actually had to pay for, not to be worshiping in it, but almost like a college situation. So you got people of such knowledge that they could normally handle any questions that came from the various faiths. They never stretched it out, as you mentioned a while ago, to Hindu or Buddhist or whatever, but this was something I had never experienced. It was very interesting the first time a rabbi gave the main service in our congregation. His reactions to us and ours to him, there was no negativism, it was just different. But also, we had never seen imams walking across our campus during the day, doing dialogue with our pastor and so on. Sometimes just the strangeness of something you've never done interferes with your growing of knowledge, because you don't know, you feel less comfortable making the contact. Someone did that before me, and it just was wonderful. And I was very glad to hear what you just said, that there has been some effort already going for this. You can build good, wonderful relationships in that. And that, I think, opens my mind to hearing what they're really saying, not what I expect them to say, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. The 3 golden rules, or the 3 rules of Christer Stendal, Bishop Christer Stendal, of Interfaith Dialogue. I'll remind us all again, I would imagine I mentioned them. The first one is to hear about the other person's religion from them directly, right? Not from a book or not what you heard about it. The second is to not compare your best with their worst. And the third is to have a sense of holy envy, right? Something in the other person's religion. Gary, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. We Jews are not curious enough about other religions. As I've sat through this, there have been very few questions from Jews to Christians. Questions have mostly come from Christians to Jews. And I think that the reality is we live in basically Christian world. We need to be able to ask those questions, understand. We can't fit together if we don't understand. But we're not asking those questions, and we're not getting a lot of our group participating in this.
That's a good point.
I'm here because I've lived my whole life in Christian communities, and I know almost nothing about Christianity. And it makes it really hard to succeed in the bigger community if you don't understand it. And it seems like for Jews, it's like almost a sin to want to talk about Christianity. My opinion.
Yeah. Steve?
My first experience with a multi-faith was a funeral. My friend Joe Bologna and Renee Taylor, they're actors. He had a multi-faith funeral at Good Shepherd on Santa Monica, where they had a rabbi, a cantor, and it was 3 hours long. And it was the first time that I was ever in a Catholic church, and there was a rabbi that spoke, openly. It was an incredible service. And of course, Renee, being the comedian she is, after the whole thing was over, had like almost like a comedy half an hour telling stories about Joe. It was one of the most incredible things that I've never experienced anything like that. And I thought it was wonderful. And that was like 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. But I wanted to share something, if you wouldn't mind, real briefly. A good friend of mine is French, and I'm actually going to France with her. She has an apartment in Tours that her mother left her. And when during the war, her father had a winery, and the winery was in occupied Germany, and the chateau was in unoccupied France. France. And he was one time with his helper, was bringing with the horses, bringing the wine barrels from the winery to the chateau. And the Germans stopped them and said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm bringing wine to whatever. And they said, sure. And they shot into a barrel of wine, and wine started pouring out. And he made a big fuss. You're ruining my wine. They said, go ahead. Every other barrel on the wagon had Jews in it. That's how they were smuggling them over into unoccupied, France in order to save them. I just think it's such a wonderful story that I know her, and she's telling me this because she knows it from fact. Another time, the Germans came to the winery, and he was part of the people that fought the Germans, the militia or whatever. And so they had all these guns in the winery. And so the Germans were coming. So he spread a tablecloth across all the wine, all the guns, and put wine and cheese out for the Germans. And they all sat there and drank the wine and cheese and left and never saw the guns. So they're in honor of the Holocaust. I just thought that these were really wonderful stories to tell.
Well, thank you, Steve. A fitting end to our to this this eve of Holocaust Memorial Day. The name of the day, by the way, in Hebrew is not Memorial Day. It's Yom HaZikaron LeShoah uLeGvura. It's the day of commemorating the Holocaust and acts of heroism. And it's been important in Israel to not just mention the victims in the grief, but also the acts of courage. And to that being an act of courage, it's wonderful, Steve, that you shared that with us. So, Pastor Jane, I want to thank you for opening up your church for this mini series.
What a gift! And not only that, but I just feel like we've all gotten to be better friends with one another. So when we can finally see one another again, we need to have a party. In fact, talking about that, we still want to show. I'm still onto this. A Serious Man, and Terry and Jim are going to have to fly back from Michigan to come and watch with us, but we're not sure quite when we're going to show it because Rabbi David's going to be away for a little bit, but he and I are definitely want to get together and have a Serious Man party, and because it's good, we're going to laugh a lot and have a fun time. So just stay tuned. Will we dress
like
for
the characters?
What?
Will we dress like the characters in the movie?
If you can, yes, and I'm guessing there's plenty of vintage stores here in Palm Springs that have the perfect 1960s garb for
my closet.
Yeah, I was going to say, Richard, you don't need to buy any new clothes for this.
Yeah, it's right there in my closet.
It's right there in your closet.
I'm Jewish, Pastor Jane. I don't throw anything out.
Oh, there we go. We're going to come to your house, and maybe you'll be able to clothe all of us.
Yeah,
even better. But it'll be a really fun party. We'll have a really good time, and we look forward to Rabbi David and I look forward to doing something else down the road. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Peace be with you all.
Thank you, Rabbi David. Thank you so much for bringing all your efforts and expertise, and the Jewish Federation for making this possible.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.